Today you're going to be learning how to draw and shade rocks. Rocks are common elements in almost every landscape. On a big scale, they are the mountains. On a small scale, they are the boulders or stones in a field. Getting comfortable with depicting rocks that show planes and structure will help many of your drawings. So here are some key points for success. The first one is to learn to see planes. Even rounded boulders have planes. Planes are the angled surfaces of a rock. If you want your rock to have real volume, you need to see and show these planes. A second point for success is to show planes with shading line angles, shadows, and cracks. You can show planes by drawing value changes on the form of a rock. The line between light and shadow, like for instance this line that we're seeing here, the line between light and shadow will fall at the edge of two planes. So showing this value shift from light to dark defines some of the planes on your rock. You can also indicate the direction of a plane by the orientation of your hatching lines across it. You'll notice that these hatching lines, a lot of them just mimic the contours that you're seeing of the planes themselves, or even the contours of the side of the rock. So look to contours whenever you're trying to figure out what direction your hatching lines should go in. And you want to draw your hatching lines in such a way that they show the path that a raindrop on the rock would take if it was falling across the surface. So for instance, if we have a raindrop coming down here onto this rock, it would follow along this path, and then it would angle down this way before creating a puddle on the ground. Same thing if we had a raindrop that fell on this side. It would come straight down this plane. We have a new plane here, so it would change direction. So always think about that whenever you're shading. If raindrops would fall on your rock, what direction would they go in to show that angle change or that plane change? Next, use simple value scales and see the shapes in each zone. Additionally, look for and include the light and dark wedges. When we can simplify rocks into basic value shapes, it helps us look at them as simplified forms instead of, this shape with, 1,000 grays inside it. So always try to simplify a rock into maybe 4 shades of gray to begin with. And then from there, you can add in all of the subtle gradations that you see. In addition to simplifying the value scale to help you look for different shapes, you also want to look for these wedges. Now here are some examples of wedges in the work. These are little bits of the rock that are either, hiding from the sun or catching the sun to where you have like highlights and light little wedges. That's going to add an extra sense of realism to the work by looking for and placing those wedges in. Cracks will change angles as they move from one plane to another. Cracks and veins will help you show plane changes. The cracks change direction every time they pass onto another plane, so look for cracks in your rock. Make sure they change angles along with your shadows and shading lines. And then the last point for success is always ground the rocks with dark shadows. Adding shadows in at the base of your rocks grounds the rocks to the earth and gives them more weight. Before I begin shading my mountains, I need to analyze and then draw out the plane changes on my mountains first. I can see the plane changes due to the value changes across these forms. After drawing the ridges that show the plane changes, I would encourage you to map the angles the mountain is going in within the planes. These angle changes will dictate the direction of your shading marks. So it's important to get these angles accurate, as the direction of these marks will help give volume to the form you are shading. These can be easy to find if you analyze the direction of your shadows within each plane section. Most of the time, the angles that your marks should be drawn in will also reflect the contour of the mountain or rock itself. Once you feel confident that you've captured each plane change and the direction of your marks within those plane changes, feel free to begin drawing this out on your mountain area. When you're ready to begin shading, Shade your rocks, simplifying your values to at least 4 basic values. This will help map in the basic structure of the form without it becoming too complicated. You're going to need to roughen these values throughout your entire mountain plane or throughout your entire rock. For a mountain plane, it may get complicated. So if you slow down and just really analyze every individual mountain section, you're going to do fine. One way to help simplify the values that you're looking at is whenever you're focusing on the photograph, squint your eyes. When you squint your eyes, you're going to be blurring out the detail. And that's going to help give you a sense of the basic placement of values in every individual section. You may also find as you're shading in your mountain range or your rocks that your sky or values that are surrounding your mountain range and rocks may be to the wrong value. I'm noticing that my sky is a little bit lighter than it should be because the tops of my mountains are white and it should have a bigger contrast with the sky. So I've had to go back and adjust my sky a little bit more to help my mountain range pop forward. Once you've roughed in the values, then you can go back and add finer detail by shading in the subtle variations of grays you may be seeing within a particular plane. As you begin shading in these finer details, pay attention to the direction of the values within each plane change. On mountains, the white areas are snow that is laying upon a ridge or crevice. These ridges and crevices imply the form of the mountain. So if you ignore the direction they are to be drawn in, your mountain can look flat or very wonky. And because these mountains are further back in the composition, I only want to use my 2H pencil to shade them. One of the ways to show perspective is to have objects get lighter in value as they recede into the distance. Therefore, by only using a 2H pencil, I am ensuring that my values will not get too dark and my mountain range will look like it's sitting back into the distance. So remember, when you're creating a landscape, you always do the sky first, and then you shade the next thing that's furthest away from you. And whatever that thing is, whether that be like a tree line, a mountain range, or rocks, always use a lighter pencil like a 2H. Additionally, I want to make sure I am not overdoing any of the detail. There are lots of little gray bits within my mountains. These areas can feel completely overwhelming. And trust me, there were times during this where I'm like, this is too detailed. I just want to give up. I don't want to do this anymore. And those are natural thoughts to occur whenever you're doing something that's complicated. But you have to understand that is part of the process. Part of the process is still committing to your work of sitting down, grabbing a pencil, and just drawing. And I gotta say to you guys, when I did that and I just plowed through the difficult areas, my drawing really started coming together. But to help you get through those overwhelming times, just simplify your values again. So to help you build up those values on your mountains easier, squint your eyes when you analyze the values in your photograph. So as I'm shading these mountains, I am squinting my eyes when I look at the photograph to blur out all of these extra bits of detail. And then while my eyes are squinting, I look back at my drawing and I say, okay, do the value areas I have in my drawing match these blurred out value sections I'm looking at through my squinted eyes in my photograph? If they don't quite match, then I will build up the rough, squinted image I'm seeing in my drawing. When I shade with this blurred vision, I simplify the shading process because it helps me to pick space a little bit more accurately. You know, another way we can show space using perspective is that when things are further from you, you're going to see less detail on them. So by squinting our eyes to rough in our value masses, we're helping the mountains or rocks or whatever we're shading next look like it's sitting back into the distance. And the result is a finished mountain range. You can still see the crevices and the plane changes in the form, but notice how I did simplify all of the little great bits of information. I am still including the information I need to include to imply the form, but I'm not putting in an insane amount of detail in there. Just enough to imply what I'm drawing, to show that it's a three-dimensional form, and then I can be done and move on to the next section in my work.